So thanks for the intro. Happy to be here. While search might not be the most exciting topic anymore because it's so long in the market already, still most retail companies are spending roughly 50% on their budget, of their overall budget on search. And what we've seen recently in the market is that Google came up with its own bidding solution, fully automated, accessing the whole data pool. And this is actually great news for the ones who are not really good at marketing, because now they are lifted to the average. They are mediocre, and the really good ones, they will use the same solution, so also being damned to be just somewhere as good as the rest. So what I'm going to do today is take a deep dive into Google Smart Bidding and show a little bit how it works. We tested it. We won't as deep as I could go because I'm limited in time. I have just 20 minutes. And I would rather focus a little bit on actionable things. So what can you do in order to still stand out and be better than the rest? And let's get into the content. Just briefly, I love this slide. My colleague Mark did it for me. I'm a coffee nerd, so I really like drinking specialty coffee, and I can differentiate between the Ethiopians and the Kenyans and just everything. And on my move from Berlin to Brooklyn, I got this beard here. And when I still have some time left, I do calisthenic stuff, handstand, and I'm very passionate, but probably not really skilled at it, but I like it. So let's get into the content. What we're going to do is show what TROAS actually does. And to summarize it, it does a great job on maximizing revenue. It's a bit difficult to get the targets right. It lacks accuracy, and it tends to over-report on its success. And then we take some more time to give you some insights, what you can actually do to stand out, and it's all on the measurement side. So the rules of the game are changing. We are getting rid of these tiny little operational things and get way more strategic, but there's still a lot of potential to stand out. So let's get into the revenue section. We did 3 tests, 2 on Google Shopping, 1 on text ads. It's always hard to find a benchmark because there's so many different bidding solutions. So we tested third-party solutions. We tested some in-house developments from retail companies and ran it against TROAS. And what you see in all 3 instances, there was a considerably higher revenue delivered by Google's bidding solution, TROAS. And what you see at the bottom is the targets we actually set, and we have one bubble in orange, means we set a target of 2.7, but we only achieved 2.2. So it's somewhat close, and that's why it gets this orange bubble. The second test, we set a target of 2.7, but we only reached 1.8. So if you take a look at the 2 bars in the middle, the traditional approach, I had a ROAS of 4.1. It gets some more revenue with Google, but the ROAS dropped considerably. So overall, we wouldn't consider this being a great success. The third one is very apparent. There was a ROAS of 8.1. Now we got to a 20 while still increasing revenues. Why does it have a red bubble here? It's because if I put in a ROAS of 12, I don't want to see a ROAS of 20, which is nice, but I would rather want to get some more volume in. That's why it's not ideal in that sense. So taking a look under the hood, what it truly gets right and does incredibly well is balancing the efficiency across all different segments. So what we show here is the device ROAS. In the traditional approach, you always see that bidding tools struggle to level the ROAS. So in one segment where you have a low ROAS, you should pull away budget and reallocate it to more efficient areas. And this is exactly what TROAS does. And you see the span on the TROAS side is much smaller than on the traditional bidding side. The same with geolocations. In the traditional approach, it's something you have to constantly monitor and make sure that you push the good locations and level the ROAS again to get the highest efficiency. And this is something Google does in a fully automatic way, and it balances it pretty well. We can do the same exercise on audiences here. And in the traditional approach, what we usually see is that the low funnel audiences, like recent website visitors, if they come back and we retarget them, we get a massive return. So we see this compared to the account average, 247 delivers in ROAS, while Google also levels this. And this is a very clear case where it does something we actually do not want, because we know these low funnel audiences are all people who would come back anyway and purchase, so we do not have to spend too much money to reacquire them, but it does its job. It just takes the numbers as they come in, doesn't question them, and levels the ROAS, and doing something which is technically right. The algorithm isn't wrong, but it's not helpful, and we actually should not do it. Let's take a look how it reacts to the target settings. On the left chart, you see that the ROAS we put in was constantly, the ROAS target we put in was constantly higher than what we actually achieved. At some point, then we wanted to get to a higher ROAS, so we lifted the target, and it started reacting a little bit, but still it never really hit it, and we struggled to get the performance we needed out of it. So it's not very reliable. And then in the second test, for some reason, it was totally different. It hit the targets almost constantly, even the weekly targets. But we saw there was one promotional day, sales day, and we saw a pretty substantial gap in that specific phase. And let's highlight this a little bit. So on that day, it was actually the National Sales Day in France. So every human would know now conversion rate is up. So bring your bids up and just get more traffic in. The TROAS bidding actually didn't really understand it, and the day was gone. We got a massive increase in ROAS. What we would have wanted is push the bids and actually get way more traffic in, take it away from the competitors, and don't have that ROAS peak, which we didn't want. So we see if we as humans work with this Google bidding, we still need to do that job by proactively changing the target settings in expectation of certain performance results we are getting. Why does it tend to over-report on its success? So, I mean, there's two questions. The first one is clear. Why does Google want to show better numbers? Because they get investment according to the return advertisers get out. So the better the return they can sell us, the more budgets will flow in. That's pretty simple. But what does it mean technically, and what's going on under the hood? It's pretty interesting to see. So in the traditional approach, you see that non-RLSA, so non-retargeting audiences, get a 45% revenue share of from the entire spend. We have 45% of the revenue we drive comes from prospecting in the end. And the low funnel audiences, the high buying propensity audiences are relatively small. So if someone has just recently visited the website, we don't want to push too hard to bring him back again, because we know they will probably buy anyway. On the TROAS side, it's entirely different. The proportion of sales coming in through RLSA audiences, so prospecting, is way smaller, and the low funnel audiences are being pushed heavily, and this is an artifact in the numbers in the end. We see great success because someone clicked on the ad. What we don't see is whether people would have bought anyway without us pushing this bid and paying to reacquire these customers. Just a different view on the same thing. If someone comes in through a paid ad, then clicks on a bunch of other ads, might be still organic listings, and clicks on another paid ad, in this case a Google Shopping ad again, at a 60% likelihood, TROAS will squeeze in another ad, while the traditional approach will mainly stay away from that and only at a 30% likelihood will squeeze in that ad. So any attribution system will correlate or will assign credits according to the number of clicks, and if you squeeze in clicks at the end of the funnel, these attribution systems tend to react and show a greater return. Again, same thing, again, another proof. When we did these tests with DDA, so the dynamic attribution Google is using, and what the tool then does, it randomizes audiences. So we get one click or one impression, TROAS gets one impression, so they're evenly split. So in the end, we get just 50% of the traffic. So if we switch the whole thing off, how much more sales would we expect? Of course, we would expect to double sales. But switching TROAS off, we saw that we got 119% increase. So where are these 20% coming from? It's just a wrong allocation of credits based on the measurement Google is using. And this is just something, it works pretty well, but be careful, it tends to over-report on its success. The most important question now is, what can we actually do? I think nobody here in this room is overly excited to be just mediocre. We want to stand out and be better than the rest. It's a tough game. There's Amazon. We are squeezed by Google as well. And somehow we want to outperform the rest of the market. And let's take a look at what's needed. Let's go one step back. When I started in online advertising, we were getting paid in affiliate networks based on a cost per order. So whether we sold socks for $10 or Gucci handbags for a few thousand, it's the same cost per order, we got the same money. Then someone said, hey, that's kind of stupid, isn't it? I mean, there's way more value with a high revenue. So why don't we relate these, the fees we pay to the revenue we get? And then the next smarter guy came back and said, yeah, but nice, I'm selling my socks and laptops. My socks have a margin of 70%, my laptops of 5%. So we should take into account the actual margin and measure our performance based on that. And the next step of the evolution was then people coming in and saying, hey, yeah, but I'm winning so many new customers and they are so loyal, so they're making repeat purchases all the time. Why don't I predict this? And in areas where I find loyal new customers, I push much harder. I don't care that much about the revenue, but I care about the repeat purchases coming in over time. That's something how Zappos got incredibly successful, because they were relying on these repeat purchases and also trying to reflect that in the acquisition. So in the end, what companies truly want is optimal or selling high margin products at low return rates, mainly to new customers. What companies ask us to do when they approach us is, hey, is it possible to get maybe 10% more revenue out of what we are doing? And yeah, might be. But this is nothing which will now move the needle. It's important to acquire traffic in a smart way and kind of predict what's going to happen down the road. Let's take two examples here. We use the TROAS bidding, and we just give it revenue figures. And as I mentioned, it does a great job in leveling the ROAS. And we have here the top 5 cities, and on the right we have top 5 brands, and you see the ROAS fluctuates between 2.2 and 2.4. So it's a very tight span here. So it looks pretty good, right? But then if you start taking into account a true ROI, where we take into account returns and margins of the product sold, we see, oh, wow, it doesn't look as even as it did before. Why? Let's take the example of the brands. We might sell a store brand, which has a much, much higher margin. So there's more value than the revenue would tell us. Then in different cities, there's a different product mix. I might sell more low-margin products in one region than another. And it highlights that the revenue optimization is good to drive revenue, but if you care about the margin, it's not doing its job. And then we can drive this one level further. We can include expected repeat purchases from newly acquired customers. And if we do this, we see that the span gets even larger. And usually what you have is that in the top 5% of your zip codes, you get maybe 80% plus of your repeat purchases. So the leveling the ROAS across segments is nice, but only on the right KPI. And if you do it on revenue, it's totally unbalanced on the right KPI. So the thing is, the trick, if you want, how can we take these LTV numbers, product margins, expected future margins, and push them back into the Google system so that Google starts doing what you truly want, instead of optimizing a silly KPI, just revenue, and having a byproduct, which is then, okay, I win also some new customers and I'm happy with that. That's not enough going forward. So the question is, I mean, does the system react to this? Is it something which is hard-coded, it just optimizes revenue no matter what you give it? And we did 2 tests where we ingested revenue figures, but measured the LTV ROI, so margins, expected future margins. And you see on the darker bar, that's the TROAS. The lighter bar, that's the traditional approach. And in both instances, the traditional approach delivered a better ROI when we ingest just revenue numbers into TROAS. Why? Simply because Google would optimize based on the numbers they get in. Then in test 3 and 4, we provided these LTV numbers. So we ingested them into the Google system and used them in the traditional approach as well. And then you see the efficiency of the algorithm, because it's still doing exactly the same, but on a refined data input. And all of a sudden, you get better results. This is nothing entirely new, because as we are working with lots of companies, we are used to getting requests like, drive my revenue, and we're always going back and saying, yes, that's something we can do, but is it really what you truly want, or is it something you have to rethink and rather run a little bit slower, but get the direction right? Overall, there are a few enhancements, things you can build around the Google bidding, because in the end, the bidding it's just an algorithm, but you have to make it better. And the key thing, and we are going to show how we can do this, is the data input side, measuring and ingesting the data. Then you can do some other things. I won't go into detail here. How does that work? So first of all, it's a 2-step approach. In real time, so when the pixel fires, we know what's contained in the shopping basket. So we know it's a luxury dress, it's a new customer, and we know what roughly the margin of these products would be, and we do some estimation on the cost, packaging, shipping, and we take that guess, which gets close to reality, and ingest it in real time into the Google bidding. So this is a much better proxy than the revenue already. And then we do a post-processing. So we take the true numbers out of the back end. We then know all the costs. We know the exact product margin. Over time, we get information about returns. And then we override what we had put into the system and facilitate the algorithm to actually react to what we provide here. To summarize this, in order to stand out, you have to be excellent on the measurement side, and you need to fuel third-party AI, whether it's Google or Facebook or any other biddable media thing. You need to ingest these numbers into these tools so that the algorithms work on the right data, and then you have to get rid of outdated target KPIs, and revenue is the most prominent of them. It's easy, but sometimes easy is not good enough. And that's, I think, my advice to you, and I hope you can make this actionable. And I see 0, 0, so I made it in time. Thanks a lot.